Nobody paid her any attention. Just another quiet woman in a sweater and jeans. But 1 hour after she stepped into that store, everything changed. The cameras cut. The alarms froze. And the veterans, the ones who'd seen real war, stood completely still. This is Silent Stories, where whispers carry truths the world tries to bury. If you believe in stories that make your spine tingle and your heart race, hit that subscribe button now. The bell above the glass door gave a soft jingle as she stepped inside, drawing a brief glance from the clerk behind the counter. But he looked away just as quickly. She didn't look like the kind of customer that stayed long. She was maybe in her late 40s, maybe early 50s. Hard to tell under the knit beanie pulled low over her forehead and the scarf that wrapped loosely around her neck. Her jeans were dusty, the kind worn from work, not fashion, and her boots had a few years of dirt in them. She didn't smile, didn't speak. Just walked past the row of deer mounts on the wall and stood in the back corner of the store where the handguns were locked in the glass display. Behind her, 3 men talked loudly about suppressors and recoil, one of them a retired Marine judging by the ink on his forearm and the stance that never leaves you after the Corps. They didn't notice her. Not yet. But something about her eyes, pale blue, unblinking, held a kind of silence that swallowed the noise around her. The clerk, Dan, young and used to weekend cowboys who pretended to know more than they did, gave her a nod and came over. "Looking for anything in particular, ma'am?" he asked. No response. Just a slow raise of one gloved hand, finger pointing to a black Sig Sauer P226 with a threaded barrel. Dan blinked. "That one." She gave a single nod, the way a soldier acknowledges an order. He reached for the key ring at his belt and unlocked the case, lifting the weapon carefully and placing it on the mat in front of her. "Great choice. 9mm, double action, smooth trigger pull. Police issue in a lot of states. You familiar with?" Her hand touched the gun before he finished speaking. Not to hold it, to feel it, palming the side with the sort of precision that made Dan pause. She didn't flinch, didn't ask for help, just inspected the weapon, then turned her head slightly, as if listening to something beyond the walls of the store. A hum, pattern, whatever it was, it changed her face. He didn't know what it was yet. But it wasn't interest. It was memory. Outside, the wind picked up, blowing dust down the sidewalk past the gas station across the street. A black SUV rolled slowly past the shop, windows tinted darker than legal. One of the Marines inside nudged the others. "You see that?" he whispered. But they were too busy laughing about a malfunctioning Glock. The woman turned slightly, only slightly, but Dan caught the movement. She looked toward the far wall of rifles like she had been here before, but not in this store. In another like it, somewhere overseas maybe, somewhere where the steel was scratched from real use and the air smelled like sand and gunpowder. She raised her other hand and placed her ID card on the counter. Dan leaned in. The card was old. Worn. Not a driver's license. It had an eagle seal, not American but NATO, and her name typed in military script beneath a rank. "Who issued this?" he asked. The woman just looked at him, and for the first time he felt cold. "One moment, ma'am," he said, backing toward the small office in the back. He closed the door and picked up the phone. "Tony," he whispered to the store owner on the line, "you need to get in here. Now." "She's showing me a NATO clearance ID. Looks real. Like decades old." Tony was quiet. Then, "What name?" Dan read it out. Silence again. Then Tony, voice lower now, "Don't move. Keep everyone in the store. Don't let her leave." Click. Dan returned slowly, his smile practiced. The woman was still there, but now she wasn't looking at the handgun anymore. She was watching the mirror behind him, the one that gave a clear view of the street. Her eyes didn't blink, didn't move, just fixed on something. Dan turned casually. Another SUV, different make, black again, same tinted windows. One of the Marines noticed it now too. "Hey, y'all see that one?" he said. "Same as the last. Creepy, huh?" His buddy laughed. "DA probably, or someone tracking cartel buys." The woman reached into her jacket slowly. Dan froze, but all she pulled out was a folded map. Not digital. Paper. She unfolded it on the counter and pointed again. Not at the gun this time, but at a tiny red circle marked over a place in the mountains. Dan squinted. That's... He stopped. He recognized the spot. Barely. It was one of those old Air Force installations they'd decommissioned after the Cold War. The kind you didn't just find unless you were looking for it. "Ma'am, are you trying to report something?" he asked. But her hand just stayed there, steady, pointing, like a compass needle. Then came the pop. A soft sound, barely audible, like air escaping a tire. One of the lights above the counter flickered and went out. The Marine by the suppressor display stood straighter. "You hear that?" he said. But before anyone could answer, all the lights in the shop dimmed. Not out, but enough to notice. And the silence that followed was sudden and absolute. The woman turned her head, very slowly, toward the door. And then, she said her first word. One word. "Now." That's when everything went wrong. The power failed. Completely. Cameras died. The humming fridge in the back clicked off. The emergency light above the door sputtered once. Then went dark. The air turned heavy. The three Marines instinctively reached for their hips, but only one of them was armed. They weren't expecting this. No one was. A voice outside yelled, muffled but angry. Then glass shattered. Not inside. Across the street. Then another. Then gunfire. Real quick bursts, not American pattern. Suppressed. Controlled. The Marines hit the floor. Dan ducked behind the counter. But the woman, she walked, calmly, toward the rifle wall. Not in panic. In muscle memory. And as she reached the case, the lock snapped. She jammed something into it. Some kind of electronic key. The case swung open and she pulled out a custom M4, not store standard. Not one they sold. It had been hidden there. For her. Dan stared from the floor, heart pounding. "Who the hell are you?" he whispered. She didn't answer, but she loaded that rifle like she'd never stopped using one. And in seconds she was at the door. She didn't open it. Not right away. She stood there, listening again. Then she leaned to the side, drew a sidearm from behind her back. Not the SIG she'd asked to see. This was older. Worn. And it had initials carved into the grip, EM. She fired one shot through the glass. Clean. Precise. A scream followed from outside. Then silence again. Dan was frozen. So were the Marines. They were watching her. But they weren't seeing a woman anymore. They were seeing a ghost. A weapon. And one of them whispered it out loud. "No way. She's dead. She died in '02. She was listed Kia in Kandahar." But the woman turned back for a moment, eyes flicking toward them like a candle in wind. And that's when he saw the patch on her inner sleeve. It wasn't visible before. Faded but clear. Task Force 39. Black Ops. Disbanded. Buried. The door flew open. A man stormed in, tactical gear, night vision flipped up, face hard. But he wasn't looking at the Marines. He was looking at her. And for the first time, he hesitated. "Elena," he said. "They said you were..." But she fired. Not to kill. To warn. 2 inches above his shoulder. He backed out fast. "You don't know what you're doing," he yelled. But she did. She knew exactly what she was doing. And the whole damn store stood frozen as she whispered just 3 words. "They found me." No one moved. No one breathed. The gun store, once filled with laughter and casual talk, had become a tomb of silence. The woman, Elena, if that was really her name, stood just inside the shattered doorway, one foot on broken glass, the other planted steady like she'd done this all her life. Outside, the wind howled down Main Street like something ancient was being stirred. The Marines hadn't spoken since she fired that warning shot, but they were now crouched together behind a display of hunting knives, exchanging quick, silent looks, each one of them realizing they were deep inside something way above their clearance. Dan, still flat behind the counter, could hear his own heartbeat thudding like drums in his ears. The ID, the patch, The way she handled the weapons. And the way that man, whoever he was, looked at her like he'd seen a ghost. She hadn't denied the name, Elena, and she hadn't denied what followed either. They found me. That single sentence sat like a thundercloud above all of them. Found her for what? For who? Outside, there was no more shouting. Just the sound of two vehicles pulling away fast. Tires screeching as if someone had ordered a tactical retreat. No sirens. No cops. Just that eerie calm. Elena moved first, stepping outside like she owned the air, sweeping left and right with her M4 like it was an extension of her spine. Her shoulders didn't twitch. Her hands didn't shake. She aimed at shadows with the kind of discipline only the old world operatives were taught. Those Cold War ghosts who weren't officially trained anywhere, just shaped in the dark. The retired Marine, Carter was his name, Dan remembered now, finally stood up. He was pale, sweating, and not from fear but from recognition. "That's her," he said under his breath. "That's Elena Morgan, Task Force 39. She's not supposed to exist." The name hit the room like a bolt of static. The second Marine nodded slowly. The Ice Widow. That nickname floated between them with the weight of a war story. The kind no one tells because they're not allowed to. Elena came back inside after 30 seconds, locking the door behind her, then dragging a steel shelf in front of it like she'd done this before. "They're probing," she muttered, "watching to see if I was bluffing. Next time, they won't knock." Dan finally stood up, still holding the ID she'd handed him earlier. "Ms. Morgan, if that's even your name, what the hell is going on?" She didn't look at him, just walked behind the counter and opened the hidden panel where Tony kept the off-grid landline. She picked up the receiver and spoke one number. That was it. A single frequency code. No dial tone. No confirmation. Just a soft click. Then she slammed the phone down. "That'll bring them," she said. 10 minutes. "Who?" Carter asked, stepping forward. "Who's coming?" She didn't answer directly. Instead, she pulled a small waterproof pouch from her jacket and tossed it onto the glass counter. Inside was a single Polaroid, faded, crumpled, a black and white photo of 4 people standing in front of a steel aircraft hangar. One of them was her, at least 20 years younger. The other 3 were men. And one of those men was General Mason Caldwell, the now-retired Deputy Chief of NATO forces. The same one who vanished from public life after a classified breakdown in 2007. "They buried us," she said softly, touching the photo. But someone started digging. The story spilled out in pieces, not all at once, but enough for Carter and Dan and the others to feel the frost of truth creep into their bones. In 2001, after September 11th, a sub-operation within NATO's intelligence wing authorized the creation of Task Force 39, a shadow unit not listed in any official records, tasked with predictive threat elimination using AI-aided field agents. Not predictive like surveillance. Predictive like pattern-based preemption. These weren't hit squads. They were ghosts sent to stop events before they ever happened, using intelligence not yet released to the public. Elena Morgan was their top operative. Codename, Ice Widow, because she never missed, because she never looked back. She did 12 operations across 3 continents, none of them traceable. But in 2004, after a mission in Crimea, she disappeared. The last transmission she ever sent read, "The threat is within, going dark." NATO listed her as Kia. That was the story. Until now. Dan was shaking. "So you've been hiding? For 20 years. She nodded. "Until 2 weeks ago." "What happened?" Carter asked. She finally met his eyes. "Something changed. Someone activated the protocol again. The AI system we shut down back then, the one that predicted terrorist acts before they happened, was turned back on. But it's not hunting terrorists this time. It's hunting dissent." She reached into her bag and pulled out a black drive the size of a coin. "This has the activation logs. Someone tried to wipe it, but I got to it first." Her voice lowered. "They'll kill anyone who knows this exists." And then the lights came back on. Just like that. No warning. No buzz. No flicker. Everything hummed back to life like nothing had happened. Elena froze. "That's not the grid," she said. That's override power. They're coming now. Carter turned to the other Marines. Get to the back. Lock the stairwell. Anyone comes through that basement hatch. Drop them. Dan backed away, voice shaking. This is insane. This isn't real. You're talking about AI predicting threats and black units inside NATO. This is spy thriller nonsense. Elena grabbed his collar with surprising force. Do you think I want this? Do you think I want to come back from the dead for this? I lived off-grid for 21 years, hiding in desert towns and mountain cabins, never staying more than 3 weeks in one place. I gave up everything, but they found me, and if they kill me before that drive reaches Washington, they win. They erase the last line of proof. The pounding on the door wasn't a knock. It was a command. Tactical fists. Precision. Elena's head turned. That's not law enforcement. Then who the hell? Dan began, but she raised her hand. Shoo! A second of pure silence. Then another pounding. Then a voice. Distorted. Robotic. Male. Open the door. Comply immediately. Synthetic voice, she whispered. They're using front units. They're not real agents. Carter raised an eyebrow. Wait, robots. No, she said. Worse. Contractors. The next blow on the door bent the hinges inward. Elena raised her rifle and said one final word before hell broke loose. Positions. The breach came fast. Tacticals with face shields and zero insignia flooded the store. But Elena didn't fire wildly. She moved with surgical precision. One shot to the chest. One to the thigh. Non-lethal but disabling. She knew these weren't civilians. She knew these men were chosen for one job. Extraction or elimination. The Marines returned fire from the back, and Dan, to his own shock, grabbed a shotgun off the rack and fired at the legs of one man trying to flank. The store became a war zone. Glass exploded. Shelves fell. Screams echoed. But the strangest part of it all was how calm Elena remained, like she was walking through a memory. Within 2 minutes, the last attacker was down. Wounded. Disarmed. One of them tried crawling away, but Elena stepped on his back and ripped off his comms. She turned it on and spoke directly into the mic. Try again, Caldwell, she said coldly. I'm not dead yet. Static answered. Then a single reply, filtered and faint. You should have stayed hidden, Ice Widow. Then silence. Dan sat behind the shattered counter, bleeding from a cut on his forehead, chest heaving. What now? He whispered. Elena walked past him and picked up the small drive again. Now we deliver this to someone who can't be bought. You mean the government? She shook her head. I mean the last person alive who remembers what this really is. She pulled out a burner phone, flipped it open, and typed one number. The call connected. She only said one sentence. You owe me, Colton. It's time to repay. Then she hung up. Sirens finally came, but not local. Federal SUVs, helicopters in the distance, men in suits. Elena turned to the others. We have 5 minutes before that door opens and they turn this into a crime scene. I need 1 driver, 2 rifles, and a route west. Carter nodded without hesitation. I'll drive. The second Marine picked up a scoped rifle. I've got north. Elena looked to Dan. He was still sitting, stunned. What about you? She asked. He looked up slowly. I sell ammo on weekends. I'm not a soldier. You're standing, she said. And you didn't run. That was all it took. He nodded. I'll hold the back. Elena grabbed the photo again and folded it back into her pocket. They'll keep coming. They don't need warrants. They don't need orders. They're ghosts just like I was. She stared out the shattered window, now filling with the blue flash of incoming vehicles. But they made a mistake, she said. They reminded me who I used to be. And as the 3 of them slipped out the back of the gun store, vanishing into the alley with the flash drive and whatever truth it held, the agents in black poured in through the front, too late to stop what had begun. A war not of bullets or borders, but of memory. And the woman they thought was long dead was finally awake. The tires screeched against the gravel as the truck veered off the main road, its headlights killing just before they hit the treeline. Carter gripped the wheel tight, jaw clenched, eyes darting between the cracked windshield and the rearview mirror, where black SUVs were beginning to scatter across the dusk-blurred highway behind them like wolves fanning out in a hunt. Elena sat beside him, legs stiff, rifle resting across her lap, the black drive clenched in her palm as though it were the last fuse to a hidden bomb. No one spoke. Not yet. The road curved left, then narrowed to a dirt trail lined with old, splintered fence posts and thick brush that blocked any line of sight. It was a shortcut Carter knew from his early hunting days, one that hadn't seen a working vehicle in 10 years. Behind them, the sound of distant engines grew fainter, but not gone. Dan, in the back seat, was still trembling, a deep cut across his eyebrow, dried blood caking down his cheek. He kept holding his breath every time a twig cracked or a bird scattered, as though he still hadn't accepted he was no longer just a gun clerk but part of a fugitive convoy holding a file that could collapse what was left of national intelligence. "Keep heading west," Elena finally said, her voice quiet but firm, cold like steel dragged across ice. "We need altitude. They'll jam signals soon. I need a clear path for satellite bounce when I transmit." Carter nodded without asking why. He knew enough now, enough to trust her instincts more than the GPS on his dashboard. She wasn't panicking, wasn't theorizing. She was executing, and in that silence she was terrifying. They reached the ridgeline just before the last light of day dropped behind the peaks. Carter pulled the truck behind a long-dead barn. Its roof collapsed, rusted chains dangling from the rafters like nooses. It wasn't shelter. It was cover. "We move on foot from here," Elena said, already out the door, motioning to the ridgeline. "We need 3 miles of elevation, minimal tree cover. There's a satellite window opening at 2107. I have 60 seconds to upload this before they burn the network." Dan finally spoke, breath shaky. "You're talking like you've done this before." Elena looked at him as she shouldered her rifle. "Because I have. In Bosnia. In Jordan. In places you've never seen on any news map." She turned to Carter. "You're ex-Marine. I need you close. Flank right if I'm pinned. Shoot to wound. We're not assassins. Not yet." And with that, she vanished into the trees. Her steps made no sound. Not even leaves crunched under her boots. It was like watching a shadow flow between trunks, a whisper moving uphill. Carter followed, checking his rear every 20 feet. Dan trailed behind, gripping a flashlight but not daring to use it, his breath turning to fog in the cooling night air. As they ascended, the darkness settled like a trap. The forest groaned with unseen movement. Animals or enemies, they couldn't tell. Carter kept seeing flashes between branches, lenses reflecting light, maybe drones, maybe snipers, maybe just the tricks of adrenaline and fear, but each flash made his gut tighten. Elena stopped suddenly at a small outcropping, her hand raised in a silent halt. She knelt and pulled a device from her backpack. A foldable antenna, the kind Carter hadn't seen since Fallujah. She set the coin-sized drive into a reader, flicked a switch and glanced at her watch. 30 seconds, she said, voice calm. "We send this to one person. If we fail, it never existed." "Who?" Dan asked. Elena's reply was simple. "Director Nolan. MI5. Carter stiffened. "British intelligence?" "He was the only one who tried to shut down Project Prophet after the Warsaw incident," she said. "He owes me." Dan swallowed hard. "What if he's compromised?" "Then this goes nowhere," she said. "And we're ghosts again." She tapped a command into the reader. A tiny light blinked green. Then the night erupted. A high-pitched whine, not audible to normal ears, ripped across the ridge. The antenna sparked. The green light vanished. Then came the flash. Not gunfire, but something electromagnetic, pulsing from the valley below. "EMP!" Elena shouted, yanking the device and drive into her vest just before it shorted. "They're jamming analog now." Carter spun around, eyes scanning the treeline, and that's when he saw them. Not SUVs, not soldiers, but 3 humanoid forms gliding uphill. No footsteps, no heavy armor. Just dark figures, fast, seamless, in suits that bent light around them. Optical camouflage. Contact left, Carter shouted, firing a burst. One figure jolted backward, sparks flying from its shoulder, but it didn't fall. They're not drones, Elena shouted. They're chimera units. Hybrid exos. They're testing them. Dan fired wildly, screaming, missing every shot. The first chimera leaped, clearing 10 feet, and landed behind them. Carter turned and tackled Dan to the ground as the figure raised a stun baton. But Elena spun mid-fall and shot the unit in the knee, the bullet hitting a weak joint in the armor. It dropped, but not dead. She fired again, not to kill, but to disable the CPU port behind its neck. "We need distance," she yelled. "They'll be tracking heat next." They ran. Fast. Down the backside of the ridge, sliding over wet pine needles, ducking under broken limbs. The forest closed around them like a closing jaw. Behind them, the chimera unit's mechanical breathing echoed like a dying animal. "If they're deploying test units in the open," Carter said, panting, "this is bigger than AI control. This is full asset deployment." Elena nodded grimly. Project Prophet was never just prediction software. It was behavioral override. "What does that mean?" Dan gasped. "It means," Elena said, stopping to reload, "they're not just using AI to anticipate future threats. They're using it to reprogram the present, to reassign allegiances, to break willpower at a neurochemical level. They've moved from control to conversion." Dan stared at her. "That's not possible." Elena raised one eyebrow. "I saw it happen in Venezuela, and again in eastern Ukraine. Men who thought they were defending their homes, who suddenly turned on their own families. No memory of it afterward. Just blankness. Prophet doesn't predict threats anymore. Creates them. They found a hollow beneath a fallen tree, just wide enough to hide in." Carter layered branches and brush while Elena checked the drive for damage. It was scratched but intact. "The EMP fried the antenna," she said, "but the drive's shielding held. We have one more chance. But not from here." "Where?" Carter asked. "There's a substation west of Dead Horse Ridge. It's abandoned. But the comms tower still works. If I can reach it." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Carter already knew it was a suicide run. 50 minutes on foot, through open woods and high terrain, with chimera units tracking every thermal signal north of the state line. And now they'd shown their hand, which meant command would be sending full teams next. Not testers. Not silencers. The real ones. "We split," Elena said, standing. "You two draw them east. I'll go west. If I make the upload, you'll hear it on every major broadcast before dawn. If I don't, go to Nolan. Deliver this in person. If you can't, destroy it." Dan stared at her, then at Carter. "We can't let you go alone." "You have to," she said softly. "I've already died once. It's easier the second time." Carter grabbed her arm. "You're not dying. Not tonight." She held his gaze for a long moment. And then, for the first time, something broke through her armor, something human. "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing me." He nodded once. She turned to Dan. "Stay alive, clerk." Dan smirked through his fear. "You too, ghost." And then she was gone. Again. Into the dark. Elena moved like wind. Quiet. Sure. Merciless. She looped west through the hollows, zigzagging across dead zones she'd memorized from an ops map 2 decades old. She'd scouted this area during her first months of hiding, not because she thought she'd need it, but because old habits never died. The tower loomed in the distance, a single rusted needle against the starlit sky. She climbed fast. By the time she reached the platform, her hands were bleeding from cold steel. She opened the junction box, pulled a wire, jacked in the drive. The green light blinked, then blue. "Come on," she whispered. "Come on, Nolan." And then a voice, clear, British, a bit older, but unmistakable. "Elena." She closed her eyes. "You got it." "I did," Nolan said. "And so did they. We've got 30 seconds. Then it's war." And that's when the spotlight hit her. A drone above. Bright. Blinding. Then the pop of rifle fire, high velocity, clipped the railing inches from her face. She hit the deck hard, shielding the drive as bullets tore through the tower. But the blue light stayed on. Data flowing. The truth pouring out. Elena rolled, pulled her last flashbang, and launched it skyward. Not to blind, but to signal. Down below, dozens of black figures moved through the trees. Full assault. But somewhere, far off, helicopters thundered. And one of them wasn't American. The blue light turned green. She smiled. Then she turned, rifle raised, and faced the last assault. Not to run, but to buy time for the truth to land. The world would wake soon. And the Ice Widow was ready. The sky cracked open with the low roar of incoming choppers. The kind whose rotors chew the silence long before they're visible. And Elena knew she had seconds left. Seconds to decide whether she'd stay, bleed, and slow the incoming teams, or jump and vanish into the shadows again. The green light on the data uplink flickered once more, then held steady. Transmission complete. That meant Nolan had it, the files, the activation logs, the predictive threat mapping blueprints, the neural override trials, and the buried footage from Ukraine and Caracas, everything Prophet had quietly built in the dark. She ducked low behind the steel rail of the comms tower, pulling the drive and smashing it against the floor, shattering the hardware before they could retrieve it. The bullets came again, 3 precise bursts into the metal frame of the tower, kicking sparks into the air and lighting her face for just a split second. A moment that one of the drones caught. The voice crackled in her ear again, that same synthetic voice from the breach at the store. "You had your chance, Ice Widow. There's no going back." Elena didn't answer. She was done speaking to ghosts. She leapt from the tower as the zip lines deployed from the trees below. Grappling units from an unknown team moving fast, too fast to be local, their approach disciplined and silent. But she wasn't aiming for them. She landed hard behind the ridge, rolled twice, tore her shoulder, and staggered into the brush with only her pistol, 2 mags, and what was left of her strength. Blood ran down her arm. Her right eye was swelling from shrapnel. Her boots were slick with mud and pain. But she moved like she always had, 1 step ahead of the machine. 10 miles east, Carter and Dan crouched beneath the overpass of an abandoned highway. Both men watching the ridge through binoculars Carter had stolen from a gas station en route. "What's that light?" Dan asked, pointing at the flash from the tower. "Uplink," Carter muttered. "She's doing it. She's really doing it." But then came the sound, the unmistakable zip of drone wings, the dull thud of tactical boots, and the flash of countermeasures being deployed. "They found her," Dan whispered. "She's pinned." "She knew this might happen," Carter replied. Her goal wasn't survival. It was truth. But even as he said it, he reached for the bag Elena had left him, pulling the burner phone and the emergency beacon. "What are you doing?" Dan asked. Carter dialed. The number connected instantly. "This is Echo 3. Widow may be down. Extraction now or never." The voice on the other end, British and calm, replied, "Acknowledged. Task force inbound. 6 minutes." Carter didn't wait. He loaded his rifle, looked Dan in the eyes and said, "Stay here. If I don't come back, make sure the world keeps talking." "But I was trained for this," Carter said. "She gave us a chance. I'm not wasting it." Back on the ridge, Elena crawled through the undergrowth, pain surging with every movement, but her focus never broke. She knew they would come in waves. She knew the Chimera units would be close behind. And she knew if they captured her, they wouldn't just kill her. They'd erase her again, scrub her from memory, rewrite the entire narrative to fit the agenda of Prophet. The tower behind her exploded, sabotaged probably to ensure no trace remained. That was their pattern. Burn everything. Deny everything. Elena reached the edge of a clearing and saw the first soldier step out of the shadows. Not Chimera. Human. But faceless under a matte black helmet. She didn't shoot. She held. Waited. Watched. His stance was wrong. Not a hunter. Not a drone pilot. Hesitant. Then another emerged behind him, female this time. British uniform, Not US. Both of them stepped forward slowly, weapons lowered. Agent Morgan, the woman said. We're MI5 Special Rec Unit. Director Nolan sent us. You did it. Elena staggered to her feet, pistol still raised. Proof. The woman lowered her hood, revealing an old scar Elena recognized, Julia Voss. Former Intel liaison. One of the few still trusted. Elena lowered her weapon. Her knees buckled, but they caught her. Is it out? She asked, eyes fluttering. Broadcasted worldwide 10 minutes ago, Julia said. BBC, Reuters, independent networks, Nolan blanketed the planet. Prophet is exposed. Caldwell's name is already trending globally. Elena smiled. Then I can rest now. And she closed her eyes. But she didn't die. Hours later, inside a field hospital on a secure MI5 outpost, Elena awoke to silence, clean air, and the gentle hum of monitors. Julia sat beside her, reading intel briefings, but stood the moment she saw movement. You made it, Julia said. Barely. Your shoulder was shattered. 3 cracked ribs. But the adrenaline carried you through. I've never seen anything like it. Elena's voice was a whisper. How bad? Julia sighed. Worse than we thought. Prophet had data on 27 world leaders. Behavioral modeling. Blackmail caches. It wasn't just preemptive, it was manipulative. They weren't hunting threats. They were shaping policy, controlling narratives, using AI to fabricate loyalty where fear had failed. Elena stared at the ceiling. And now, half the world is in chaos. Investigations are exploding. Congress is calling emergency hearings. NATO's entire intel branch is on freeze. But you, Julia leaned in, you're a legend now. The ghost who came back. You saved what was left of the truth. I didn't save it, Elena murmured. I just reminded people how to see it. In the days that followed, the video footage from the gun store went viral. The woman in the sweater and jeans, silent, calm, studying the weapons like she'd written the blueprints. The Marines who stood frozen when they saw her patch. The name Elena Morgan became more than a headline. It became a whisper passed between bar counters, across barracks, over intelligence briefings from London to DC. Some believed, some didn't. But no one could deny the fear in Caldwell's face when the footage aired. He disappeared within 48 hours. Some said he ran. Others said he was taken. But Elena knew better. Prophet had always planned for failure. It had contingency protocols. It had seeds elsewhere. And she wasn't done yet. 3 weeks later, in a small diner in Idaho, a young couple watched the TV as a news anchor spoke. Still no sign of the woman responsible for the takedown of the covert AI system codenamed Prophet. Elena Morgan, also known by the name Ice Widow, vanished after the incident. Officials say she was offered asylum and retirement. But no one's heard from her since. The man turned to the waitress, smiling. Crazy story, huh? The waitress, quiet, older, blue eyes under a knit cap, poured his coffee and smiled faintly. Yeah, she said softly. The quiet ones always surprise you. She walked away, her wrist stiff, her step measured. Outside, a black SUV idled quietly down the street, watching, waiting, because some ghosts don't rest. They just wait for the next moment to rise.